Hey guys, we're here with Michael Lafleur on Across All Worlds with David Peck sitting in for the Baxter Kruger. We've been in his office having amazing conversations. We're going to have one with Michael, which is, he just told me just before we hit record, he's the David Peck whisperer. You guys go back a long ways, right?
I'm just having trouble even focusing because I'm sitting in the chair.
The aura is still just
Yes.
emanating. The Shekinah is there. The Shekinah is all over that chair.
Dr. Kruger,
It's coming from the volumes.
where art thou?
I just read about a study where the more that you razz a person, the more they know they're loved. And so it's, maybe the best part about this whole experience is that Baxter isn't here.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we got a Canadian on the call. Canadian over here. You're kind of dancing in both.
Listen. I'm a born and raised Canadian that at the age of 18 became stateside. So I feel
I'm
like
very sorry about that.
And you are sorry about that, aren't you?
Oh yeah, there we go. Here we go with that. Yeah, Michael, don't you love it when people tell you you've got a Canadian accent? I said, well, my dad was from Britain.
Amazing.
He has an accent. I don't have an accent.
It's so epic because one of the earliest illustrations Baxter ever used, and it was a great one, is you can't hear your own accent.
Right.
And that's one of those points that's just blown me out of the water as I've now, looking back, understand so much more of the journey, like going back 30, 40 years. We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are.
Yeah.
But we don't know we're looking through tinted lenses. And I love what all the reimagining work that you're doing is all about, starting to see what's always been there, but we couldn't perceive it because of the tint in our lens.
He already got us on track.
Well, I'm a little offended / annoyed that he didn't play with our joke a little bit more. Instead, stepped right into it.
Yeah, right. Like we're gonna have to. Let's get into the deep end.
Yeah.
But he did say about.
I gave you my best stuff before
who are
the
you,
camera
Kaiser
started rolling.
Soze?
I had
Like,
it
what's
rolling,
going on
and
here?
you didn't hit record, so
But you are all about it as well. So you actually touched it. You go back 20 plus years with Baxter.
Almost. He says he keeps adding 5 years on every time he tells the story. But and a good thing he's not here, because there's a rather famous thing I'm known for, and he and 3 buddies from Mississippi all witnessed it in person. But yeah, we go back at least 25.
Wow.
Since we've actively had him in our midst, teaching, kind of unpacking, giving us the gift that he always has been to us, to the Aussies. It was the Aussies first, and then the Canadians. Kind of places he landed where he got a much warmer reception than he did kind of profit without honor in his
Good
own
colonials, town. Michael. Good colonials, basically. Australia,
right.
Canada,
Right.
I mean, come on.
They just know how to get in line.
Remnants of imperialism. How good is that?
Isn't that a forerunner and a harbinger of what this beautiful gospel is about, right? We were able to embrace and welcome a Southern gentleman from Mississippi inside the cross-cultural realities of Canadian and Australian culture. If that ain't the Holy Spirit, if that ain't Trinity working hard to make this gospel real, I don't know what is.
I love that David has surrounded himself with radical, charismatic Holy Spirit, like, gifts of the Spirit movement.
Okay, just so you know, I'm a little uncomfortable with surrounded, but
But share a little bit, Michael. We were talking beforehand, and our journey sounds very similar, so that folks can get to know you a little bit. You used language that I even used, where I had a profound shift take place 15, 16 years ago. Didn't have language to describe it. My background is charismatic, but I didn't have, the language came later, but and those like Baxter were huge in providing some of that language and understanding, taking us back to early church fathers and so on and so forth. But share a little bit of your story, because it sounds similar to some of my journey.
Yeah, raised a Baptist pastor's kid, baby of 4. Growing up, a little older than you, Jason, but growing up in kind of 60s fundamentalist evangelical Christianity, kind of always felt a little uncomfortable with that. My identity, I wanted to find it elsewhere than inside my family and its faith kind of experiences. And so not surprisingly, lots of us kind of push away. I was in a little bit of shape back then and a good athlete and kind of high social capital. So I always was easy for me to find another place to feel good and kind of affirmed about myself. So it was pretty early on I began to just go, this God's not really in my world, in my frame. And that latent dualism that I think is one of the most profound lingering things of the last couple of millennia of the Western, particularly the Western theological tradition. I was a prime example of it. I grew up not knowing that God actually was really enjoying my love of athletics or my love of music or whatever.
Right.
And so that kind of narrow bifurcated world kind of caused me to sort of turn away. I wasn't some wild rebellious kid, but I just said, thank you, no, I'm going to create a whole other identity. And so you kind of have some success in high school. You win some championships. You have a pretty girlfriend. You play, learn how to play Stairway to Heaven so you can impress people at the party or wherever. And you finally sort of are pushing away from all that. But inside there is something that has come through imperfectly as it's been embodied from your parents and your faith tradition, and it's still there, kind of doing something. Didn't know what it was, but it took getting away to university, being part of the beer chugging championship team in first year, and just partying my brains out before I finally got, there's not really a lot inside that.
I appreciate
your faith experience.
Sorry, I appreciate you were part of the championship team and that you noted that.
Oh, championship team. Yeah. We could knock back. If you want to know the actual game, it was pretty amazing, but it was a multi rounds of those little small flute draft glasses of beer. David knows them from places like Brunswick House and stuff like that in Toronto. This competition, measure that. So all of us have this way of feeling good in our identity, whether it's sports or being a comedian or whatever. All that to say that a dramatic conversion experience, literally on the highway, 5-hour drive north from Toronto to where I was going to university, and kind of came into this faith like guns a-blazing. Got up the first morning of my newfound faith, memorized 6 verses of scripture, and of all passages, you ready for that? Or 7 verses. 2 Corinthians 5:14-21.
Oh, come on.
And we're convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. And died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves. Like, what? I stumbled into union before I had a clue what it was. But that's the zeal that I went into my young faith. The same zeal I brought to athletics, I brought into my faith. So I was just working the system so well, right? And you do all you can, and you go all in, and you kind of sell all for Jesus, burnout for Jesus even. I played varsity sports. No, I got to lead the university group, the Christian fellowship on campus. So all of these dualistic shifts, I call it lobotomizing my humanity. There was a severance that I willingly submitted myself to, built into the evangelical fundamentalist worldview. And that just did such damage that I didn't appreciate. And so there was a long journey of healing and recovery and kind of crashing, dark nights of the soul, as the essential deconstruction that happened. And then about 8 to 10 years into my faith experience, I had a little bit of healing, just enough that I could begin to take a few steps down a path of vocational Christian ministry, which I was training for. And then in 94 was when I had a profound encounter with unconditional love that just blew my paradigms wide open.
Yeah, that sounds a little bit like my journey. The separation message coming from the platform, but the love of God always arresting me all along the way, healing me along the way, until I too had, for me, I had many encounters with unconditional love, and then a major shift 16 years ago. You used the word severance, though. There's a really good show. I think you guys know about it.
I've got a whole teaching series called Unsevered. It's all about experiencing and entering into a reintegration. Many of us are recovering, lobotomized, Neoplatonic virus survivors. We are part of a system that has actually, maybe without intending, but in some cases intending, to actually cause us to negate our authentic humanity and to deny being genuinely ourselves. So if I had to say, looking back, I would frame so much of this journey, even before I knew it, as recovering my authentic humanity and getting permission to be myself. It's absolutely the most glorious thing that I can see now, at least for the last 10 years. And it's so amazing to get to be, as Francois Dutoit says, for the first time, I'm free to be me in my own skin. That's Galatians, his rendering of Galatians 2:20. So it's like, what? And that's included things like getting to hang out with a guy named David Peck, and this guy's a magician and he loves documentary film, and oh yeah, he's a filmmaker, and oh yeah, he's a philosopher, and all of that is good. It's beautiful. It's part of the way life was intended to be, and we get to recover that now. We get to play inside a recovered humanity.
Come on,
that's what I understand and how I teach. And try to, whatever little part I can do, and even a few videos that folks may have seen out there that I've helped produce for Baxter and a few other friends, like the Sacred Presence video. Those are attempts to try to encourage people to dare to believe in a different kind of spirituality.
Yeah. The movie premise or the TV premise, Severance, is that you would have two different lives. And I hadn't thought of it. We were talking last night about this conversation and just the continuation of this sacred secular divide that we were raised with, that you don't even realize, because as I've awakened to union, I have all these other things, these other passions and these other things I'm pursuing, and it'll still show up. This, I'll say one of the things that I have a production company, and my brother and I are telling stories and working on films and hoping to get one made here in the near future. And so I will go to bed immersed in a character as I'm developing their motivations and the why and what's going to happen next, and I am consumed with this fictional character. I wake up in the morning, and I remember even the other day realizing I was feeling guilty because I'd been giving so much time to a fictional character. And the idea that could have any impact, I had somehow, and I caught myself realizing I'd placed some sort of more value on the conversations we're having for the Tacos podcast or with Across All Worlds than I was putting on the creative endeavors, and that to be fully human is to be fully Jason, and to be fully Jason is to be able to be fully engaged in every aspect of how he's designed me. I think you could speak to that. I know you could speak to that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's so many places I want to go with this. And Michael, we've been having this conversation for years. And how do we? I was going to say, how do we include others? They're already included. How do we welcome others into the conversation? Might be a better way to say it. And my concern has always been around language, right? So the moment somebody hears your story, Michael, they're annoyed, they're upset, they're triggered. Oh,
intrigued.
Right. There's curiosity, yeah. but maybe there's also a critique.
Right. Sure.
So how do we say no? This is something else. This is something other. To quote, sort of to paraphrase Baxter, there's way more going on here than meets the eye. Can we at least have a new conversation? Can we peel back some of those layers? Can we, the jaundiced, can we address that notion that, we all see things with a particular edge or a particular color, a worldview, a framework, and so on. Yeah. If that's possible, then we can start to actually have a more holistic, friendly, helpful conversation about this thing called union, this thing called relationship.
Yeah.
Because I would argue most world religions, most people are actually on the pathway to becoming fully alive,
right,
within a framework of a particular sort. So we're already there. So why do we actually need to put new language to it, right? So it's such a big conversation, and yet it's so simple. Right, Michael? And that's what kind of makes me crazy, because when you mentioned sacred secular, there is no divide.
No.
And that's the thing, right? And I know you know that. Probably most of the viewers watching this know that. But I think so often we presuppose it. We step into a conversation, and this is where we need a little Chomsky in the room. We are so overwhelmed ideologically by our way of seeing. It's almost impossible to see the palace.
Yeah.
We can't see the palace that we're standing in already. It's just, anyway.
No.
So philosophically, theologically, relationally, it just has so many implications. It's kind of mind blowing, but how do you get people over that line? That help them to climb the fence, if you will.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a challenge, but it's also a frustration.
Well, so I was in a conversation with someone the other day, and we're 2 hours in, and he's continually using this, talk about language. He keeps using the phrase, "I just want to give God the glory. I want to give God glory," and and finally, about an hour, an hour and a half in, I finally said, "What does that look like? What do you mean when you say give God the glory?" And he stopped, and he's a very thoughtful guy, and he said, "Actually, I don't know." And I said, "I would like to suggest that it's you being fully awake in the moment, because you can't give away what you don't have." But I understand that the language that he's coming from is the thing that I was feeling when I'm sitting down to write this character. I went to a Bible college where there were only 4 options for ministry. You know what I mean? Ministry was you were a pastor, a missionary, a worship leader, or a children's minister. Like those were your options. And if you weren't doing any of those things, then you were less than on the hierarchy.
Hey guys, this is Baxter Kruger here. I'm with my friend Jason Clark. We have an ongoing conversation about all things Trinitarian, about the real meaning of the death of Jesus, practical side of living the Christian life in union with Jesus and in the union with us. And this is ongoing. It's been quite beautiful. We've got well over 60 or 70 episodes recorded so far, but welcome, come join us. Let's get to the conversation.
So one of the things that you probably know about David, and probably have heard about David and I, is we are huge film fans, and I am always finding the glory, the beauty of our healed, recovered humanity, of our essential union to not only Trinity but one another, and all kinds of ways that is so just embedded in good art, and particularly the narratives of the culture, which are our movies as well as our songs and other things. But for me, it's movie. Occasionally a good streaming series, but movies seem to have a discipline. And of course, there's an epic scene that illustrates what you just talked about, Jason. It's from the wonderful biopic called Walk the Line a few years ago. Younger viewers may have seen it.
Yeah.
The Johnny Cash story, right?
Yeah.
And it's early in the film, and Johnny's kind of always, he's selling, stuff door to door, not making but a few pennies to rub together. In desperation, sees a music studio, wants to get an audition, and shows up with his 3 guys in his band, and they start singing, this wonderful song. I just happen to be able to, because I do this all the time, pull up the slide from it, and the record producer Sam Phillips says, "We already heard that same song 100 times. Sing it just like that, just like how you sing it." Johnny says, "Well, you didn't let us bring it home." Bring it home. Bring it home. All right, let's bring it home. If you was hit by a truck and you were lying there in that gutter dying, and you had time to sing one song, one song that would let people remember you before your dirt, one song that would let God know how you felt about your time here on earth, one song that would sum you up, you telling me that's the song you'd sing, that same Jimmy Davis tune we hear on the radio all day about your peace within and how it's real and how you're going to shout it? Or would you sing something different?
Right.
Something real, something you felt. Because I'm telling you right now, that's the kind of song people want to hear. That's the kind of song that truly saves people. It ain't got nothing to do with believing in God, Mr. Cash. It has to do with believing in yourself. And I think that is, so many of us are recovering our humanity and a whole way of being human that's actually what it means to be made in the image of God, and in the freedom of the second Adam, who is continuing to share fully in our humanity and us in his and Trinity's life through his ongoing humanity. And some of these things that kind of began to dawn on us about 15, 18 years ago, reading Torrance, hearing some good teaching on it, Baxter's help, this whole idea of the ongoing, continuing humanity of Jesus has just helped me rediscover the gift that each one of us uniquely, singularly, gets a chance to refract their glory through our own particular interests and personality and wounds.
Come on.
All the stuff, the whole stuff of our story. Brené Brown says, don't orphan any uncomfortable parts of your story. Are you able to be at peace with younger versions of yourself? And this is where I would circle back to one of your earlier questions, is I think, again, in the last 5 to 7 years, I've become so grateful for even the very imperfect way that my faith was first shared with me, with what was modeled for me, because there is a truth and a love, as you said, that's still able to get through. Doesn't excuse that. It's not minimizing the damage, real lingering damage, but there is a reality about what we experience that I don't now have to shame my younger self.
Good.
I can write a letter to younger Michael and exercise extreme kindness.
Yeah.
I did the best I could
Yeah.
with what I could see at the time, as did my folks, as did some of the sincere and really, truly good people around me. As much as I look back now, or I look around even in our modern day and I say, my gosh, that's an aberration. That doesn't look like the Jesus I know, but you know what? I'm going to exercise kindness and compassion.
Come on.
Because Lord knows I need it.
Yeah. That's the nature of restoration. I mean, if he's in the restoration business, then it's not about, the thing I didn't like with the word deconstruction is it implies destruction, but it's actually a restoration project. It's always been that. The Jason of 20 years ago actually would be enamored with who I've become today, even though I might scare him a little bit. You know what I'm saying? He might even call me a heretic. But he'd want.
And I
Go ahead.
Especially for guys like David and I, we come out of some pretty cringeworthy stuff, and especially when we get associated or tied into that just by the casual use of a name or a label. Like, that's honestly why some of us have been so hidden. I don't have even a public presence out there. You'll find some of my videos, but it's like, I just don't want someone else to define me. But I actually have to risk that now. Paul Young says, hey, that's my tribe. That is the tribe I come from.
How many
willing to not be ashamed of that, but that's part of the journey.
Yeah.
How many Instagram followers do you have? About 12? Is that right?
I don't even know if I have that. I was posting for a while, but I've just shut it down because
You got it.
I don't need.
Hold on.
You gotta create content for your community, man. Come on.
12. You got
I
12
create
now.
content.
There you go.
Well, it's it's interesting, and we're sadly coming to the end of this episode, really, or pretty soon. But
Quick.
I'd love to go down that pathway with you, Jason, about the notion of deconstruction and what does that actually mean, and does it imply a reconstruction? Are we closed for renovations?
Right.
Right. Or is that just an ongoing kind of thing? Because I think it seems to me philosophically and theologically and relationally, if we're not deconstructing all the time,
Right.
there's a problem.
Well, to me, that's
Right?
that's what rethinking is. That's
Yeah.
what and the idea that we aren't doing.
Do
that
you mean the podcast itself, or do you mean actually rethinking?
Thank you. A little plug for the podcast.
Nice one.
Yeah, but in life,
So I'm here for you, brother.
in life, it's if you're not changing, you're not growing, you're not maturing, and the idea that we're not, when you're born, it's obvious that every day you're growing, you're maturing. Somewhere along the way, I don't know what it is, whatever philosophy comes in that suggests, okay, this is who I am, I can't change. And I'm like, that's the silliest thing in the world.
Yeah, I'd call it the Enlightenment Project or dualism. I mean, there's so many different things,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, Yoda, you got to unlearn what you've learned.
Yeah.
And that needs to be continual.
And the
it
lens,
seems to me.
the lens you're talking about. Now, this is where, I've used this analogy in one of my books. Well, God is not in control if we're doing plugs. But I talk about, the zebra in a field and the four guys with different colored glasses describing the zebra, and each one of them is describing it. The guy with the yellow lenses is saying it's black and yellow, and the green lens is green and and the guy, the reality is who knows the true color of the zebra? Well, the true color of the zebra is discovered in this analogy as Jesus, as the cornerstone. Like, that's got to be the lens. This love lens that we look through is actually how we determine things, which is that Christological journey that we've been on. That's the language I have now. I didn't have that language before. I just knew that my lenses were off. And I got to be able to, I got to have something to measure my lenses against. And Jesus is where I measure, is where I ask him to continue to cleanse the lens. I'm sure you can say something to that, Michael. I see you chomping at the bit.
Well, even just two things big words that will leave people hanging with as we sort of wind down this episode and maybe crank it up for the next one. David loves this term epistemic humility. So that's just saying our ways of knowing things, they're way more biased and influenced by things that we are unconscious of.
Yeah.
We know more than we can tell. So we've got to always have an appropriate amount of humility. I don't have to be wishy-washy about what I currently see, but I need to hold it with a degree of openness.
Yes.
What if I'm actually wrong? It's a great Peanuts cartoon, What's the best title of your book? You're writing a book of theology. What's the title? Have you ever considered you might be wrong?
Right.
It's a good question to ask. But the other thing is existential authenticity, and this is where I think many of us go down. One of the phrases that Eugene Peterson stumbled across it 40 years ago when I was in seminary was, too many pastors or spiritual leaders or would-be Christian influencers in today's language are travel agents handing out brochures to places they've never visited.
Right.
We don't actually know or experience. We haven't experienced this love, so we're kind of performative. We're talking about it, but we actually live in our words. We don't know how to be loved as we are. So some of us in more recent years have had to come head on with that, and it is really continuing to change, deepen, shift our perceptions and our kindness toward ourselves, others, our understanding of the ripples. What does this then mean? Not just the what, but the so what and now what of this beautiful gospel.
Man, that's a good place to pause for the next conversation. There's a Brene Brown quote where everyone's doing the best they can. My wife actually told me that first, and when I gave credit to Brene, she's like, "That's fine, but I've been saying that for like 15 years." But that's the other piece of this journey when you look back on yourself and you realize that we're all in transition, we're all maturing, and we're in the space we're in right now doing the best we can.
And by the way, thanks for the little plug on epistemic humility.
Yeah.
I actually coined the word epistemility years ago. You can read about it in Real Change is Incremental, available through BPS Books at a fine bookstore near you. But seriously, and it's really just simply, and I think, Michael, you unpacked it, it's simply saying, I'm stepping into this conversation with a sense of awe and wonder and curiosity and humility to say, oh, wow.
Yeah.
I never thought of that.
Yeah.
I don't see the world that way. Please tell me more. Yeah. That's essentially it. And
that's it.
And it's a beautiful thing, or it can be
a
beautiful thing.
And let's uncomfortable, but let's unpack it in the next conversation.
The next episode.
Yeah,
Got it.
AcrossAllWorlds.com, perichoresis.org, familystory.org. We'll see you in the next one.